down the years.
Formula One tracks throughout the world witness drama and excitement, but few offer the challenge and intrigue of Interlagos. And it all got a little too much for Nelson Piquet Sr. in 1982.
And this is sensational, the race winner.
If that wasn't bad enough, he and Keke Rosberg were later disqualified after their cars were found to be underweight. Home fans understandably crave Brazilian victors, and they were again to be disappointed in 1989 as Nigel Mansell upset the odds to claim a maiden win in his Ferrari. Brazil could at least celebrate in 1993. Ayrton Senna took home the title that year, but only after the weather removed the threat of the then race leader, Alain Prost. It was another 15 years before the nation would again celebrate a home victor, with Felipe Massa winning last year's Grand Prix. But there were to be tears rather than cheers, as this now famous overtaking manoeuvre decided the championship in what was one of the sport's greatest finales.
Lewis Hamilton's up to fifth! Lewis Hamilton has made it up to fifth by the end of the line! Ferrari
2008 was Lewis Hamilton's year. And by coincidence, this year's race will again see a Brit do battle with a Brazilian. Jenson Button just needs to better his teammate Rubens Barrichello to become the second successive British Formula One world champion.
So that is Brazil, where our own Jenson Button is on the verge of his first Drivers' Championship. Of course, Ari Vatanen is still with us. Now, you're not campaigning in Brazil this weekend. Why is that?
I have been to every single Grand Prix since Nürburgring, so no, except for Japan actually, and I just was in Africa, I was in Asia. I think now we have to. Tomorrow evening I go to Finnish sauna in our home in Provence, and then ready for the election week.
Sounds like a lot more fun.
Yeah.
As far as the campaign goes, it's been very challenging, hasn't it?
to say the least, I'm somewhat surprised this kind of a passions which were flared by this campaign, but it is true that the power does wonders to a man, and absolute power does even more. And obviously, because this is a kind of a battle of spirits, that this is like we reformists who would like to give FIA family a new start, and then the old guard who is hanging on to the power, and that's what it is. It's not a question of a couple of programs or words. It's a question of two different worlds.
When you say the old guard, Max Mosley is leaving.
But he has endorsed my friend Jean Todt, wholeheartedly, and obviously Jean is obliged to continue with the key personnel of Max Mosley, whereas we would propose the new key personnel, obviously, to give a fresh start and credibility to FIA.
Max Mosley has been very heavily involved in Jean Todt's campaign. Let me just remind you of a letter that Max Mosley wrote to Prince Faisal, where he said that you, Ari Vatanen, will lose, and lose badly.
Well, next Friday we will see if that was true or not. In any case, it's quite sad that the outgoing president, who should be remembered, because Max Mosley has done really excellent things for FIA, not just in the Formula One safety, but also in the mainstream cars, so that he should be remembered for good things, that his legacy is something which could be admired, and there's no need for this kind of election tactics like that letter.
Interesting. Ari, we'll leave it there for just a moment. Well, what about the Interlagos circuit? It's certainly a favourite with the drivers, and for this week's flying lap, Mark Webber takes us round the circuit with Felipe Massa, who'll be waving the checkered flag at the end of this year's Brazilian Grand Prix.
Hello, I'm Mark Webber. I drive for Red Bull, and this is a flying lap. Here we are on board with Felipe Massa at Interlagos in Brazil. Who better to take us around than the local boy himself? Into turn one. Center S, very famous corner, very easy to find a lot of lap time there if you get it right. Out of there, turn three, bit of a killer on the neck through there at the end of the race. Narrow little back straight here, traditionally quite bumpy as well. You hear the crowd there, amazing atmosphere of this circuit. Every year we go there. Through turn four, downhill, very easy to run a little bit wide there with understeer. Through the left-hander again. Ready for a very, very fast 6 and 7 blind right-hander up over the crest. You pop up over the top here, and you've got to be hard on the brakes into turn 8. A long hairpin, if you like. Duck downhill into 9 here. A long banked left-hander. Accelerate hard out of there. Busy section of lap this for the driver. Into turn 10, which is another long corner, if you like. Into then plunging downhill left, giving the neck a little bit of a touch-up again before we brake for the last corner. Massa losing the rear a little bit on the way in there. They've been hard on the power up the hill. Very, very important horsepower here. This track's a little bit at altitude, so the engines do lose a little bit of performance in terms of how much air they can take on, cutting as much of the track as he can there to trigger that beacon as soon as possible.
Well, that was Mark Webber taking us around the circuit there. Our guest tonight is Ari Vatanen. I want to talk a little bit to you about the direction that Formula One would be taking if you were in charge. How do you feel about the British Grand Prix?
Well, in Finnish we have a saying proverb that, you know, if you have a conflict over where to build a church, you have to build it in the middle of the village. And for me, with all the fairness to Donington, to anything else, the middle of village for the church in the F1 terms, it's Silverstone in the UK.
It's Silverstone. Interesting that you think. Why?
Well, it represents you know, heritage of British motorsport, which is incredible in its own terms, and it also is a symbol that we need new tracks, but we cannot do that at the cost of old tracks, which would mean that we would alienate our normal customer base. So while we are developing Formula One, you know, we must also have races everywhere in these traditional countries, including USA.
How do you think you'll do next week? You think you'll win?
Well, I have life has given me many lessons of humility, but I must say that it's looking positive and we are in a tailwind. We'll
be watching. Ari Vatanen, thank you very much indeed. Well, that's it from us this week. My thanks to Ari Vatanen. Don't forget, we are back tomorrow after qualifying.